Like I said, more complex topics take time to understand. So just giving a few minutes here and there is probably not enough to understand the topic. If you want to understand the topic, if you want to challenge the topic, you probably need to give it a longer time frame. And that is how your brain determines, is that right or is that wrong? You wake up and you're on your phone. You come back from work and you're on your phone. You're about to go to sleep and guess what? You're still on your phone. So we see that we use the phones that we have so much, but what do we really consume? Because my generation, for one, we consume a lot of short form content over long form content. And there's a statistic that shows that from 2000 all the way to 2024, the average attention span of a person has reduced all the way from 12 seconds down to 8 seconds. Now, 12 seconds and 8 seconds doesn't seem like a big difference, but when you consider that that's a 2/3 of a drop in the average attention span, now that is really bad. So, since we already spend a lot of time on our phones, then we probably have to use it a little bit productively, because how we learn is all determined by what we see online. So, here I'm going to make the case for why long form content is probably better for you to consume than short form content. You might know all about this, but there might be a few things that you guys have missed out on, and that's what I'm going to try to cover in this week's video. Here's the problem that I have with short form content. Well, exclusively, it's not really bad, like I said. However, it's the way that people use it. So some people might actually use it to brainwash other people who are watching their videos. Let's just say people who only prioritize in short form content, where they don't have any forms of long content, they usually send out messages without saying much. So they try to make it seem as if they are living the life and everything is just rosy around them, but they don't really tell you what's really needed. Instead, they just tell you what they want you to see. But then that gives you the impression that they are probably living the life that they're talking about. So in that way, they are manipulating you, because in short form content, the most powerful thing that they can do, if they have the skill of trying to condense the information into very small segments and powerfully at that too, then they can probably succeed in this field. However, it's not to say that what they're saying might necessarily be true, because they could be saying absolutely nothing, but as long as they are speaking loud enough and clear enough and they can condense their information into that small segment, people might actually be tricked into believing that what they are saying actually does make sense. And on the other hand, there's the other field where people sometimes misunderstand what that person's trying to say, right? You see the case with many people online where there are certain clips taken of them from a 2-hour podcast, and there's a 10-second clip taken out of that, and it's taken out of context, and explicitly that comment probably sounds really wild and probably gives you the impression that he's a bad person. If you probably see 10 clips of somebody like this and you've never watched their long form content, then you are probably going to assume that they are this bad person that the clips try to portray them as. And you probably won't understand that that's not what the person tried to convey. In fact, he was trying to be sarcastic, he was trying to demean that point, and he was trying to convey the total opposite point. However, how would you understand that if you had never watched his whole content, right? And that's the dangers of short form content, because there's these two sides to it, and it's not just about what that person's trying to do to you. In fact, there's also the negative side that it has on you yourself. Like, think about it. Again, similar to that second point that I just said, you really can't understand or have an in-depth analysis over any topic unless you watch long form content. Because in 10 seconds, there's only so much that you can learn, and there's only so much that the other person can tell you. So even a 1-minute clip is not enough, I'll be honest, because sometimes concepts take 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours to really understand. And just listening to things for 2 or 3 minutes is probably not enough. You need to probably listen to it for a longer period of time. And this next point is probably the most important thing, and that is what is lost in our world today. And that is that we lose our sense of imagination and our creativity when we don't watch long form content. You know why that is? Because the more that people talk about a certain concept, you start thinking, well, do I agree with this? Do I challenge this in any way? Is there a reason that other people don't agree with this and maybe I do agree with this? And you start having these conflicting opinions in your head, and then your brain starts finally forming that opinion that it really believes it, because it's listening to what this person's saying, and then at the same time it's listening to what that person is saying. It's also forming an opinion in its head about what do I really believe in and what would other people who are watching the same thing believe in. And just by that, it can form its own opinion based on these several factors. However, let's just take a 15-second clip. In that 15-second clip, that information is coming so fast that the brain doesn't have time to process it. And what happens after that 15-second clip, you're going to scroll down, right? So you're going to go to the next one. And then it just keeps on going in that whole cycle, and it's a never-ending cycle. Your brain doesn't actually truly grasp what the other person's saying. And like I said, more complex topics take time to understand. So just giving a few minutes here and there is probably not enough to understand the topic. If you want to understand the topic, if you want to challenge the topic, you probably need to give it a longer time frame. And that is how your brain determines, is that right or is that wrong? Now, if you've made your choice on which kind of content you want, the long form one or the short form one, now you need to know how you can use it to make the best use for you, right? Now, that is pretty simple, because all you have to do is now consider, do you apply this more or do you consume more content? So I'll give you an example to start. So back in maybe June of last year, I wanted to start this whole YouTube thing. The online world was a little blur to me, so I had no clue where to start. Then I thought I might as well read up on what to do. And I started going through tutorials and going through YouTube videos on how to make YouTube videos. And I'll be honest, that was 6 months which I really wasted, because I did nothing. I tried to read books and I tried to understand it somehow, but guess what? That never came. That understanding, it never just came. So what I had to do instead, when it came to about November or December, then I decided, you know what? Reading books, that's one thing. Even going through tutorials, it doesn't really help me, right? Because I've spent 6 months, didn't help me. So I'm just going to go new path. Whatever I know, which was very little at that point, I'm just going to go into the YouTube space. I'm going to see what I can do, and I'm going to start making videos. And back in November, I remember exactly how I felt, because when I started with the first 2-3 videos, I remember knowing nothing, like absolutely nothing. I had no vision of how to do anything, how to plan my time, nothing. I just knew, okay, I wanted to make this. Now, I've spent all this time planning these 6 months, but nothing happened. So I started shooting a few videos, editing it as I wanted to, as I knew how to, which was nothing. And I started from there. And eventually, I would say the next 6 months brought me way more progress than the previous 6 months all combined together. And that simple experience taught me that trying to learn about the thing before doing it is probably naive when you have the opportunity to learn by experience. Which is why I would recommend to you guys, if you were to take a percentage of how much you would invest in learning the thing and actually applying the concept in real life, no matter what it is, I would say 10% of the time you spend learning the thing. But the rest of the 90% you have to spend applying it, because that's the only way that you're going to really learn whether you can translate it into real life or not. And the sooner you know whether you can do it or not, the better, because that's the same thing as rejection. Because once you know that you've been rejected on something, you know there's probably no use of going back, and so you can move on at least. But if you never take that opportunity to actually apply the thing and try to see whether you can actually go on with something, if there's some future in it, if you don't do that, then you're going to be in that stagnant zone where no progress can really happen. So if you want to move on, take that leap of faith and try to see what you can do with that. And that is why the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto's principle, is probably the best principle for you guys to use. So what the Pareto's principle tells you is that the small amount of your efforts, or 20% of your efforts, usually yield 80% of the results. Now, this is not too difficult to understand, because let's just say even in the content that you consume, you know that there are a few YouTube channels that you have subscribed to which give you a lot of value and content that you can use in your real life. And at the same time, there's a lot of channels that you've subscribed to that probably don't yield you much result or much benefit. So what you have to do is not to say that you completely unsubscribe from all the other channels, but you just take those few channels which give you a lot of value and you try to invest your time into that. So let's say there are 3 YouTube channels that you value, and there are like 10 channels that give you some value but probably not as much value as these 3 YouTube channels do. So what you do is you invest more time into these 3 YouTube channels in your content watching time, and the other 10 you can distribute it evenly but very meager amounts, because that way you'll see that what you're trying to do is actually more fulfilled when you invest more time in these 3 YouTube channels than the other 10. So all you need to do is just find that small group of the efforts that you put in and find that group which can yield most of the results and focus your attention on this percentage, and I'm telling you, it's going to change your life. So see, the more that you start watching long form content over short form content, it's going to challenge your thinking and your understanding, because it's automatically going to make your brain think, am I thinking the right things? Am I not? Because in short form content, you're only exposed to so little. So your brain almost accepts what it is because it doesn't have enough time to process what it's hearing. But if it hears more long form content, it's probably going to understand, it's going to process, it's going to challenge what it hears. And that is the most important thing, guys. No matter what, make sure that your brain challenges what it hears. Don't accept everything that you hear, because there's a lot of bullshit that's spoken on the internet, and never buy into that. What you need to do is be open to the fact that maybe that could change my mind. Maybe that could make a difference in what I'm doing. However, you take it in and then you think, is that actually applicable for my life and what I'm trying to do? And if you think that there is something you can do with it, then probably pursue it. Otherwise, just leave it behind. That's not for you. And if you can remember this simple thing, I'm telling you, your life will never be the same ever again. And so if you guys enjoyed this as much as I did, then go ahead and drop that like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell. And go ahead and share it with your friends, your family, anybody who you think really needs to hear this message to go and change their lives forever. And go ahead and drop a comment in the comments box about something you guys thought about this video, or something you guys would like to see me talk about in a future video. And with that, I leave you all and see you all in the next video. And always remember, never stop dreaming. See you all.
Demon, I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing.